All right, guys. So once again, we got to talk about something that the mainstream liberal media refuses to talk about or acknowledge, which is that there's a significant amount of violence in this country, political violence in this country that is happening that comes from left-wing extremists. Okay, people have been radicalized by the false narratives being pushed in the mainstream liberal media, a lot of which is just Trump derangement syndrome, right? A lot of people just hate Trump. They don't like Trump because the media has made Trump seem like the worst person ever. I mean, in the eyes of the media, he's basically the Antichrist, okay? And that is how people have begun to think about Trump in this country. I mean, again, we have compilations of videos of celebrities and Democrats coming out and basically pushing threats of violence against the former president of the United States, outright endorsing it, okay? And that has, in my opinion, led to stories like this, in which you have a deranged liberal woman from the Chicago area who is being charged with threatening to shoot former President Trump and his son, Barron. Now, I'm going to play this story, but first, I actually want to play a clip that I ran across a couple days ago, but I never had the chance to really react to it because I didn't know how to make a good video with it. But it is essentially the mainstream liberal media, CNN, sounding the alarm about the threat of political violence in this country. And I want you guys just to pay attention to how this is framed and the context of which this is framed, because they continuously push this idea, well, most of the political violence or a large amount of threats come from Trump and people who support Trump. And he's the person that you really need to worry about, which, again, in my opinion, contributes to these stories and why these stories happen. And I'm going to tell you guys why I believe that. But first, I want to go ahead and play this clip from CNN. Take a look.
The FBI is investigating online threats against grand jurors who voted this week to indict former President Donald Trump in Fulton County, Georgia. Some jurors have had their addresses, phone numbers, and social media accounts shared on the internet after their names were made public in the 98-page indictment. Joining us now to talk about this and other aspects of the Trump case is Miles Taylor. He's the former chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security during the Trump administration, the author of the new book, Blowback, A Warning to Save Democracy from the Next Trump. And I suppose there's the current Trump as well to talk about. You know, he's made these inflammatory comments about the judge, about the special counsel, and so on in these cases. You worked in his administration. How do you think this is going to play out? Because, I mean, I've talked to, was talking with John Dean about this last night. It's going to be difficult to constrain him. And it seems as though he thinks he can just cross the line and nothing's going to happen. Based on past experience.
Genuinely, Jim, I've been living inside of this data about political threats and political intimidation, and I worry legitimately that people are going to die. And we are seeing the threat of political assassination in this country is off the charts. And the experts I talked to compare it to only one thing, the 1960s. And we, of course, saw political violence. We saw political assassination in the 1960s. God forbid that happens, but the data supports that there's that danger. Look, we just saw the President of the United States threatened with an assassination plot. We saw on January 6th, the Vice President of the United States threatened with death. We saw Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, her home broken into. That's the presidential line of succession, not to mention the senior members of Congress, the Supreme Court justices who've been threatened with death, the governor of Michigan who had an assassination plot, and this array of state and local election officials. So I do worry about it. And we saw after his home was raided a year ago, a man went to the FBI field office in Ohio and shot it up. The judge here in D.C., after he was charged, has been threatened with assassination. And of course, now the jurors in Georgia in the case after he was indicted have been doxxed and threatened. I do worry we are seeing the light blinking red.
Yeah, so CNN ran that a couple days ago, okay? And again, notice the framing here. How a lot of the framing is this idea, well, a lot of the threats are coming from Trump and Trump supporters. I mean, look what's happening to the Georgia grand jury. Or look what happened to Mike Pence, and look what happened to Democrats, okay? Now, again, he sprinkled in there a few Republicans, but didn't really make it as obvious, okay, that Republicans and conservatives and people who support Trump happen to face threats of political violence. He didn't really emphasize that as much as he went out his way to emphasize the threats that come against Democrats. Like, for example, he talked about the alleged assassination attempt against Joe Biden. But again, this guy didn't talk about all the threats of violence against Trump that we have seen, that we have experienced throughout his presidency. Okay, and now we have another threat of violence against Trump. Okay, that, in my opinion, is happening because you have the mainstream liberal media pushing this narrative that somehow, some way, Trump is a threat. Okay, Trump is putting people's lives in danger. And according to this woman right here, she thinks that her threats against Trump and his son, Barron, is an act of self-defense. Take a look.
A Chicago area woman is facing federal charges tonight. She's accused of threatening to kill former President Donald Trump and his 17-year-old son, Barron.
CBS 2's Sabrina Franza was in the Dirksen Federal Building today as the woman appeared in court.
41-year-old Tracy Marie Fiorenza faces up to a $250,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison for threatening to kill the former president and his 17-year-old son, Barron Trump. The Chicago area woman is being accused of threatening to kill the former president and his son in 2 emails that she allegedly sent to Barron's school. Court documents today accuse her of sending those emails from her residence in Illinois to the headmaster of the educational institution where it is believed Barron attends school in Palm Beach County. In early June in Chicago, Secret Service field office contacted Fiorenza to schedule an interview about all of this, which we're told she sat for and on tape admitted to have intentionally written those emails from her home in Plainfield, Illinois. Now, her next court date is scheduled for the 23rd of this month. That will be a detention hearing where a judge will decide how she will continue this case and be transported from the state of Illinois to Florida, where this case was originally filed. We're at federal court. Sabrina Franza, CBS 2 News.
And we have just confirmed Fiorenza worked for the Chicago Public Schools for less than a year until she was fired in 2020.
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand something here. What's interesting about these alleged emails from this woman, okay, that she's been arrested for, emails that are so graphic that I can't even read them in this video because they're that graphic in terms of how she wants to go about assassinating the president and his son, okay? You guys can find specifically what she said, you know, by just looking up the story. You can see it. It's pretty grotesque. But she claims that she was doing this in self-defense. Right now, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean that she's doing it in self-defense or that she's making these threats in self-defense? Well, essentially what it means is that she has been brainwashed by the liberal media to believe that Trump is some type of threat on her life, which is something that the mainstream liberal media has continuously pushed about Trump and Trump supporters in this country, that we are some type of threat to other people simply because our political opinions are different than theirs, right? Again, even in that segment from CNN where the guy is talking about the alleged, you know, political threats in this country, the way he framed it, okay, he always made it seem like, well, most of the threats, a lot of threats come from Trump and people who support Trump. Trump might do this, Trump might do that. I mean, again, look at how the mainstream liberal media cover all of Trump's indictments when he actually had to show up to court and get arrested. Okay, they covered it as if there was some imminent threat of violence and destruction and chaos when none of that happened, right? It never happened. And it's hilarious to me because this is why January 6th is so bad to me in regards to, you know, giving the liberal media ammunition. That one day basically gave them the little credibility that they do have to paint this picture that Trump supporters are so extremely violent. Okay, they're the most violent people in the country. Okay, they also throw that in with white supremacy as well, too, to try to say, well, the white supremacist Trump supporters are so violent. They're the biggest threat in this country. And the only evidence that they have to really back this up is January 6th, which in my opinion was nothing compared to the political violence that we previously saw before January 6th that was happening in this country that came from left-wing extremists like BLM and Antifa. Okay, I mean, that they committed more political violence than I've ever seen in this country in my lifetime. Okay? It's not even close. We know that by any statistical measure, the BLM riots / Antifa riots were the worst political violence that we've ever seen in this country. Okay? And then after January 6th, a couple years later, we saw more left-wing extremism and left-wing violence coming from Roe v. Wade protesters who, you know, went out of their way to basically harass, dox, and threaten to assassinate conservative Supreme Court justices. Okay, I mean, again, you know, it's funny how that CNN guy wasn't very specific about who was the target of these assassination attempts or the assassination attempt. Conservatives were the target. These same left-wing extremists who were radicalized by Democrats in the mainstream liberal media went out of their way to firebomb and vandalize and attempt to destroy family planning centers that had political beliefs that they disagree with, along with also terrorizing and invading churches. Okay, so this was happening all over the country, and the mainstream liberal media was asleep, right? At one point, CNN ran a segment implying that the violence that would happen as a result of Roe v. Wade being overturned would come from the right, when the right was totally fine and okay with Roe v. Wade being overturned. It was actually the left that was upset with it. Okay, so again, this is how the mainstream liberal media plays games. Okay, I'm sick and tired of us not having a real conversation about political violence in this country coming from left-wing radicalized extremists. Because in my opinion, I see that much more than I see violence coming from anywhere else. But yet it's routinely ignored. Stories like this are routinely ignored. Nobody's talking about, well, why in the world, how in the world would this person be so radicalized, so brainwashed, that you would not only want to assassinate the president, but also assassinate his teenage son in a way that is so grotesque that I'm not even comfortable putting it in the video, because she's talking about doing it to a teenage boy, a teenager. It's screwed up. It's messed up. An individual only becomes dis-radicalized because she's constantly being told how Trump is a threat, how Trump is a threat to your life. Trump is so bad. He's evil. He's the Antichrist, right? This is basically what the mainstream liberal media is pushing. And you had all these woke celebrities that came out here and basically called for violence against Trump. Democrats have called for violence against Trump and Trump supporters. And that's why she thought it was okay. It's totally cool to do this because this is what she sees in the media. Rick Wilson of the Lincoln Project literally went on MSNBC and essentially talked about how somebody should assassinate President Trump. And he's allowed to come back on the show, right? He's allowed to be on the show. Again, this is the problem. Left-wing liberal media, they are radicalizing people in this country, and it is resulting in real-world violence, but you don't see anything being done about it, right? You don't see nothing being done about it. You don't see the censorship towards them that you see that happens towards people who are not on the left, who say things that are outside of mainstream liberal media, and then big tech says, well, we think that this is potentially a cause of violence. We think that this is dangerous. Even though there's been no real acts of violence, right? Nothing's happening, right? But again, you have radicalized individuals who believe a lie that black people are being murdered in the street by white police officers over racism. They go out and they loot and riot in the streets. Okay, they destroy their own neighborhoods. They burn things on fire. People die, lose their lives. And big tech is like, well, totally fine, right? Totally fine to push that conspiracy. Totally okay. Nothing to see here, right? Totally 100% okay. Again, it's just amazing. It really is. But like I said, Trump derangement syndrome is strong in this country. It really is. It is something that, again, is so prevalent. We have a lot of people that need to go lay on somebody's couch, okay? They really do, and be deprogrammed from the hate that they have for the former president of the United States. There's no reason why anybody should hate the man so much, considering what he did for the country and how great the country was under his presidency. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black conservative perspective. Peace.